take a second to tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Dr. Joey Smith is an economics professor at the University of West Georgia. We had a chance as the Chairman's Club members to speak to him a little bit earlier before this, and he promised all good news and very little bad news, so we're looking forward to hearing that. Before he joined the University of West Georgia, he was in the economics department at the Georgia State University in Atlanta. His degrees are several, and I'm going to read them here quickly. He has his BS in economics from the State University of West Georgia, BA degree in philosophy from the State University of West Georgia, a master's in economics from Georgia State University, and a PhD degree in economics also from Georgia State. He's well known as one of the leading regional economists. There might have been several of you out at the University of West Georgia earlier this year when they had their economic forecast, and he spoke there. I'd like to welcome Joey Smith to the stage.
I'm glad our invocation pointed out that we really don't know what's going to happen with the economy. Nobody here does. But I'm going to give you what I guess is my best guess. So let's take a look. First, we're going to start off with the lowlights. For those of you who can't follow my accent, I understand. I'm not from around here. I'm from Haralson County, so it might be a little tough. So just bear with me. The housing market continues to have a big negative impact on our region, especially in Douglas County. Douglas County has been having additional problems with the housing market on top of last year, which was already a pretty bad year. Goods production industry has been hard hit across all counties in our region. We've got 5 counties in the region. Every last one of them has seen their goods production go down. So that includes manufacturing. Regulators closed the doors on 3 banks in the region. A lot of bankers out there, you feel the pressure, I know. And it hasn't stopped yet. There's still more problems out there that could be on the horizon. Employment numbers aren't promising for a speedy recovery, but one of the things I can say that's very positive is some of the negative news that we've been hearing for the past couple of years now. Those negative numbers have started to mitigate a little bit. We're starting to see some stabilization in these unemployment rates, and we're seeing stabilization in the initial unemployment claims. We've seen drought, we've seen hail, we've seen recession, swine flu, and God knows Douglas County has seen floods. So one of the things we have to say is you probably should expect the rivers to turn to blood sometime over the next year. Okay, so just be careful. First of all, we're going to start off by looking at the nation. We look at 3 main indicators at the national level. One is the index of consumer sentiment. We look at the commercial paper spread, and we look at the index of leading indicators. And what we try to determine is whether or not the U.S. is actually where they say it is. Are we out of the recession? Have we started into the recovery? The fact of the matter is, when we look at index of consumer sentiment, we're only just now starting to see an upturn in consumer sentiment. Even in the last month, we saw the last month of reported data, it's still not looking as good as what we would hope in a recovery. But we're at least heading in the right direction. If we look at the commercial paper spread, now this commercial paper spread is the difference in the price for high quality and low quality commercial paper for 30 days. So it's this tells us sort of what the fears are of people who are lending money out there, or the fears that we're going to go into a deeper recession. Well, back at the end of 2008, this was around October of 2008, right around the time Lehman Brothers went out of business, the fear was that we were heading for complete and utter disaster. But what we've seen is that commercial paper spread over the last few months has actually come down into a more reasonable level, and it's almost in line with what we saw prior to 2007. So a lot of the fears have gone away, and the reason for this is that expectations out there, at least in the financial industry, expectations are more well-reasoned, and they're a little bit better now than they were before. Index of leading indicators. This takes into account things like changes in the stock market, changes in building permits, all kinds of stuff that we look at. And it summarizes it in one chart. And what we see is this red line right here has been pointing in the upward direction for the last 8 months. Upwards means thumbs up. It means that we're heading in the right direction. The only problem we see here is that the coincident indicators are not pointing up yet. So it's lagging behind. Obviously, coincident indicators tells us where we are right now. We haven't turned up yet. Okay, but it says that the upturn is not far away at the national level. So are we there yet? Well, for the national level, we're probably getting close. If we're not there, we're very close to being there. But at the West Georgia regional level, we're just not there yet. Not far, but not there yet. What leads me to believe this? Well, primarily housing. Housing is still one of the biggest problems that we're facing in the West Georgia region. 09 permits are worse than 08s. 08s were atrocious. If you can come up with a worse word than atrocious, that's what 09 was. Foreclosure rates aren't getting any better, and we're starting to see vacancy rates rise even above what they were last year. So people are not moving back into these houses, even as renters. But one of the things we have seen is that permit declines are starting to slow down. They actually have to. There's this lower bound on the number of permits that can be issued in a year, and it's 0. We're fast approaching that. When it hits 0 and it turns up, we've got a recovery. Okay? That's my prediction. Just going to let you know. Pending home sales in the South have been turning up, sorta. When we saw that tax credit starting to run out, when the belief was that we weren't going to have the tax credit, people stopped seeking mortgages. So we saw a downturn in pending home sales in the South. But the likely news is in the next few months we're going to see that turn back upwards because they've extended that tax credit and actually expanded it to include second purchases of homes also, as long as they're principal residences. So here's what single-family permits look like. Looking at 2005, we reached a peak in our area, 5 counties, of 9,046 houses permitted in the West Georgia region. We're down to an estimated 800 houses being permitted over the past year. That's a drop of over 91%. The main reason we still have construction workers is that all those houses that were built earlier, they're putting roofs on them right now. They're putting new gutters on them. Some of the banks are hiring them in order to fix up houses that they currently own. When we look at the housing permits, we've seen a 78.5% decline in Carroll County, Coweta down by 41.9%, Douglas County 49.2% declines over last year. And that was over a decline from the previous year of 66.4%. These haven't been a good few years for the housing market in any of the counties in the West Georgia region. Right now, we're on pace to be down by 55.9% for the 5 counties. We're running out of permits. New housing is going to start to recover when the bargains go away. The problem is there's still a lot of bargains out there. This is a spread between the average house price sold that's not in foreclosure and the average house price sold that is in foreclosure. We've seen over the past year anywhere from a $63,000 to $73,000 difference between these houses. Now, these don't represent exactly the same houses, but that's a pretty disturbing spread. It means that rather than buy a house that's out there on the conventional market that's being sold by a realtor, people can feel like they can simply wait around and buy a house at rock bottom prices from anywhere else. They can wait until the price comes to them. So it's still very much a buyer's market in the housing market. If you look at monthly foreclosures, all of these movements right here just signify that we really haven't moved much at all. Most of these, if you were to plot a trend line through these, are just as flat as they can be. So we haven't really seen a big change in the number of foreclosures that have been occurring month by month. But what we have seen is that most of these foreclosures are not getting sold back into the market. They're just sitting there. Percent of units entering foreclosure for Douglas County, we're at just a little above 0.5%. That means about, what is that, about 1 in 40 households, about 1 in 4, or I should say 1 in 40 properties is going into foreclosure in December of last year. That's a pretty high rate, but it's not the highest in the region. Paulding County actually has a higher number going into foreclosure currently. Now, to point out, at the state level, if you look across the entire state, it's about 0.33%. At the national level, about 0.27%. So our region has a substantially larger problem with foreclosures than the rest of the state does. And here's where the foreclosures are happening. This doesn't appear very well up here, but one of the things I can say is that the dark regions are the regions that are experiencing more foreclosures. And last year, we saw most of the foreclosures concentrated in the downtown area right around Douglasville. Remember, I said last year you couldn't throw a rock in Douglasville without hitting a foreclosed house. Well, I feel like a weatherman up here. We've got a cold front moving northward, and it's heading right into Paulding County. It's heading right up 92. So we're seeing some of those foreclosures move into Paulding County, and hopefully they'll move out of our region sometime in the near future. Maybe they'll head on up to Chattanooga. So what does that mean in terms of vacancy rates? Well, vacancy rates have been bumping up in all parts of our region, but the areas that are the darkest are where the vacancy rates in residential housing has gone up the most. Vacancy rates increased over the past year by 10% in southeast Douglas County. Okay, this is the area we were talking about earlier around was this Anawake and the Anawake Trails area, and just a little south of there. We've seen other areas that have had additional vacancies, but the largest increase in vacancies has been around the southern section of Douglasville and in North Paulding. What about businesses? Now, businesses is where people are turning to now, because business vacancies mean that people who are holding the loans on those properties, those commercial properties, they're going to start to have problems sometime soon. And where are those happening? Well, that same area of Douglas County is still having the same problems with business vacancies as it is with residential vacancies. They probably go hand in hand, right? When people aren't living there, they're not buying stuff in that area. But the biggest increases in vacancies for businesses has been in Paulding County. Now, that might be interesting because most of Paulding County, a lot of Paulding County doesn't have the kind of retail, I should say, that retail in Paulding County has become one of its bigger industries, and a lot of these business vacancies are the new retail establishments, the malls, the mini malls that they've built all over that area. So, I told you that pending home sales had actually started up. Well, they had been going up in the South pretty much starting with the beginning of the year. If you look at last year, about January, we saw pending home sales rising throughout the entire year, except for when people started anticipating that tax credit running out. Every one of the regions in the United States dropped off, and the South was no different. But one of the things I can say is that it didn't drop off quite as steeply as some of the other regions. And we can expect that to pick up as people come to the conclusion they can still buy houses, and that those houses are going to be anywhere from $6,500 to $8,500 less expensive. So, what are we looking at? The latest numbers show substantial declines in all the counties. Unemployment rates are at 30-year highs. They're starting to stabilize, however. We're starting to see some traction at in unemployment and in the area of initial unemployment claims. UI claims are close to peaking, if not, they've already peaked. And what I said was that back in October, they were right at a peak. I'm going to show you now that they were at a peak in October. Don't read too much in the worse than expected recent job creation numbers or job losses. We saw a worse than expected job loss in December, but it was following a better than expected job loss the previous period. They were talking about 88,000 jobs that were lost. Well, we only had 11,000 jobs that were lost in the previous period. So if you take the average of those two, it pretty much gets back to what the expectations were to begin with. Healthcare is the only bright spot that we can point at least reasonably consistently over each of the different counties in our region. And even healthcare has shown that it's not recession-proof. People have always said healthcare is the one industry that people are going to be going to no matter if it's a recession or not a recession. Not always the case. Primarily, though, most of the industrial loss that we found has been in the goods-producing sector. If you look at Carroll County, they lost 1,074 jobs in goods production, and primarily that came from manufacturing. We saw some reduction in administrative way support. This is just a fancy way of saying temporary labor. That's the administrative part of it. Construction is down, not unexpected, but healthcare was up, 389 additional jobs. If you look at Coweta County, They lost 1,200 jobs, most of those also in manufacturing and construction, both of these goods-producing sectors. The one place they saw growth, healthcare, 159 jobs. Not enough to offset 1,200 though, was it? Douglas County, the one that we all look for, we lost 4,082 jobs from second quarter 08 to second quarter 09. Humongous loss. Largest in the region, largest in number, largest in percentage terms. Big losses. Primarily those losses came from places like manufacturing, retail trade, construction. These two, construction and manufacturing or goods production. Biggest losses though were in administrative and wage support. Remember, temporary employment. And temporary employment is typically thought of as being a leading indicator. Businesses hire temps before they hire full-time workers. So when they lay off temps, it's not a good sign. Healthcare is the only one that we see that consistently has grown across these regions with the exception of some local government. If we look at Haralson County, a much smaller segment of our economy, we still see a large decline, and primarily those large declines came from manufacturing. So the growth that we've seen over the past few years, past 5 or 6 years in goods production has pretty much been wiped away. We're back to where we were in manufacturing probably 7, 8 years ago. Retail trade, the biggest increases in Haralson County came from retail trade with only 56 jobs. So we've seen a lot of declines. If you look at Paulding County, they lost a total of 1,002 jobs, primarily their goods producing also, but mostly in Paulding County because they don't have a lot of manufacturing in Paulding County. This mainly came from construction. You'd think after a few years of this housing problem, we wouldn't have enough construction left to actually worry with losing those workers, but apparently we still do. Biggest increase in jobs was from recreation. So apparently everybody that's lost their job now has somebody working for them to keep them happy on the jogging trails out there or whatever's left. Now, I've given you a lot of the bad news here. Let's talk a little bit about the good news. Now, the good news isn't that we're at a low level of unemployment, right? We all know that unemployment rates in most of our counties have reached as high as 13% in places like Haralson, have been upwards of 11% in Douglas County, almost 12, or a little higher, if I remember right, around 12% in Douglas County. But what we've seen is that when you look at these unemployment rates, gosh, this is starting to look like a turning point right here, doesn't it? So there's a potential that over the next few months we're going to see the unemployment rates start to turn. Now these are not deseasonalized, which means that those unemployment rates are going to bounce around with seasonal layoffs and seasonal hiring. But if you look through the middle of the data here and you just track this line, it looks like that line is about to turn or may have already turned. So we're looking at unemployment numbers starting to show some good directional results, in other words, heading in the downward direction sometime over the next few months. Unemployment rates over the past month that we have data for is November. Over the past month at the county level, we've seen unemployment rates decline in 4 of the 5 counties, which include Douglas County. Douglas County went down from 11.4 down to 11%. Some of this is due to seasonality, but any decline is good news. So, the inner James Brown in me always says, do you see the light, right? Do you see the light? Do I see any light behind what's going on right now? And I do see the light. If you look at unemployment insurance claims, initial claims are always viewed as a leading indicator. These are a leading indicator at the national level. People look at them as leading indicators at the local level. At the national level, this line right here marks where the federal government has decided we broke from being in a recession to being in an expansionary period. That point right there is where the initial unemployment claims change directions. This is the West Georgia region. We're only lagging behind the nation by about 2, maybe 4 months. So the idea is 2 to 4 months behind the nation's turnaround, that's when we should start to expect a turnaround. And that's when those numbers start showing up in the unemployment insurance claims. So this gives us a leading indicator that we are, in the West Georgia region, heading out of the recession. Now, how does this translate for Douglas County? Well, Douglas County probably hit its peak somewhere in this area, at least if you take the line that goes through the middle of this data, but you can't really tell yet whether it's made that turn downward. It's flattened out, but it's probably going to take at least another month or two before we can establish that Douglas County has started in that downward direction, that unemployment insurance claims have started to fall. So that we're adding fewer people to unemployment rolls than are being drawn off of unemployment rolls, so that unemployment rates can start in the downward direction for good. So, when we look at building permits, I have to give that a red dot. We're still in bad territory there, and it's not going to get a whole lot better anytime soon. Unemployment insurance claims, those appear to have turned in the correct direction and started heading back in the downward direction. Unemployment rates also appear to be at a point where it's turning and going in a downward direction, so that we're heading back toward higher levels of employment. It's just going to take a long time to get back to where we were just a few years ago. Manufacturing employment has done atrociously throughout all counties in the region. Retail employment in some areas have held their own, in other areas have not done so well. Douglas County was hit hard because Douglas County has a very large number of retail employees. And healthcare is probably the only area that we can point to as being a relatively solid green, because even in areas where we've seen healthcare declines, the declines have been relatively small in comparison with the growth elsewhere. So real estate is going to remain a huge drag on the local economy, and foreclosures are heading into nicer neighborhoods. Now, you might not think of Paulding County as necessarily being a nicer neighborhood, being from Douglas County, right? That's not exactly what that's the wrong side of the tracks, right? You're heading in the wrong direction. Well, the thing is, there are people in Douglas County right now, at least anecdotally speaking, who've decided that even though they can pay their loans, they're starting to walk away from them anyway because they're paying too much for a house. They could live next door and buy cheaper. All they got to do is walk away from the loan they currently have. So people are starting to make decisions that are not decisions based primarily on their dire economic situation, but decisions based on potentially future cash flow. Current unemployment rates and unemployment claims data, it indicates that we're probably heading back in the correct direction, that we're seeing unemployment insurance claims decline, we're seeing unemployment rates start on that downward path. So when we look at the different counties, reasons for optimism for Carroll County, well, again, we've looked at the rates. A lot of Carroll County's rates have already started to peak. We saw the claims peak last year. We've seen Tanner-related industry, health-related industry start to offset some of the job losses in other areas. Specifically, things like retail, accommodation, and food services in Carroll County have held their own. It's not nearly as large an industry in Carroll County as it is in Douglas County, and Carroll County is a little bit more insulated. There's not as much competition from other places like Douglas County has with other parts of Atlanta. Also, I don't know if you've heard lately, but they've recently instituted Sunday alcohol sales in restaurants, and this is going to be a huge boom because everybody knows that it's real trouble when you go out on Super Bowl Sunday and try to find a six-pack of beer. Now there's an alternative. Nobody laughed at that. That was supposed to be real funny. Actually, if you've ever walked out on Super Bowl Sunday trying to find a six-pack of beer, it's nearly impossible. There's police out there waiting to get you everywhere. The big problem still are foreclosures and vacancies. Carroll County has seen foreclosures continue on the upswing and vacancies as well. We lost 1,273 jobs. 1,201 of those were from manufacturing. Specifically, if you look at places like Carlisle, that's a tire company that's out close to the Alabama line, and Pilgrim's Pride. We've lost a lot in both agricultural manufacturing and in regular manufacturing. Coweta County, manufacturing, construction, transportation, they had 300 job losses through the loss of Rite Aid. The area down around the Bullsboro Road, Bullsboro Avenue, it was once a booming retail location. It's hit a snag. We've already seen places that are only a couple of years old go completely out of business. Chili's, TGI Fridays, and several other chain restaurants are gone. They built a building, they were there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and now they're gone. Foreclosures, unemployment insurance claims, and unemployment insurance rates for those areas are up. But the big reason for optimism is that they've got a new Piedmont Hospital Center down there and a new cancer treatment center that's supposed to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars in local investments, and that's definitely going to pay off. A lot of you may not know this, but Zombieland, one of the most popular movies back during the early part of the summer, was actually filmed in Coweta County. And one of the things I can say is that zombie unemployment went way down during that period. So practically every one of them that were down there, they got a job. No problem, no questions asked. But any of you who haven't seen it, should I recommend it? Probably not. I liked it, but then again, I like all zombie movies. Douglas County, retail and accommodation and food services that were always great performers have done really badly over the last year. Steel case, we lost 300 jobs in Lithia Springs. We lost a total of 4,082 jobs, and that's hard to recover from. That's a huge component of the local economy. It's close to 10%. Warehousing and distribution, however, has continued to grow throughout the recession. This is something that Douglas County has made a huge push up around the Thornton Road area at trying to maintain, because this is an area where Douglas County has a very big competitive advantage. You've got all the roads around here. You've got easy access to Atlanta, easy access to 285, easier than most. This is an area that is going to perform long term. Should I say it? Local reservoirs are full. This is a positive. A big negative, though, is that the fact that local reservoirs are full means that people have diverted their attention away from water. Don't lose focus, because just because we had a lot of rain over the past year doesn't eliminate water as a problem going into the future. Paulding County foreclosures have doubled over the past year. Residential vacancy rates continue to be lowest in the region, but they've gone up a lot more than other counties have. We always say that this 1,000-acre, $45 million airport was going to be very helpful, but there really hasn't been a lot to show from it so far. So it remains a positive. We're hoping that it's going to attract more business, because business for this airport is going to attract business to y'all as well. Brand new Kennesaw-based RILA, this is a call center that's supposed to employ 1,500 additional workers in that area. Now, this is not in Paulding County, but it's right on the Paulding County line. It's an easy drive from Paulding County. So this is going to be a benefit. And they've also are in the process of investing $100 million in the new Wellstar Hospital that they're supposed to be building in Hiram. So, what are my predictions about the future? Well, these are really easy predictions, right? The pain ain't over. When you're at the bottom of the recession and you've started on the upward track, you have to remember you're at the bottom. Okay, so we haven't gotten through the worst, we've gotten through the worst of it, but we're still at or near the bottom of this. Okay, so the path upward and out of this is going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of effort and pain. Okay? Residential real estate is still a huge problem for our areas, and commercial real estate is not far behind. One of the things that we were looking at the other day is the sheer number of dollars that have been invested in commercial real estate in our area. It's not inconsequential, it's large. UI claims have peaked. Unemployment unemployment rates are probably going to be peaking soon, if they haven't already. And we're going to anticipate a national rebound is going to be pulling up Douglas County along with the rest of the counties in our area. It's not going to be the other way around. If you look back to the 2001 recession, we led the nation out of that recession. In fact, if you look back to the 2001 recession, we didn't have a recession. Our unemployment rates never got above 6%. So we didn't have a real recession when that occurred. We've got one now. We've got a full-blown recession, and we're living through it. Okay? Now, there's a couple of things that some folks wanted me to talk about, and one of them is all of the damage that's been done by the housing market problems is going to lead to additional problems locally for people who depend on tax expenditures or taxing and expenditures. A lot of these tax revenues are going to decline going into the future, not because people are unable to afford their tax payments, but because a lot of houses in this area are going to reset their values. And this is going to have an impact on schools, it's going to have an impact on roads and bridges, it's going to have an impact on every government service in the area. So one of the things I want to leave you with is that idea. Start thinking about exactly what kinds of services you want and what kind of expenditures you're willing to fork over for it. Thank you.
With that. All right, we'll go ahead and do a drawing. If we'll allow you to draw a ticket here. This one.
Okay, everyone please stand that has a ticket. The winner of the bike is 617116.
116. All right. Congratulations.
You have to get a picture.
Yeah, we did that after lunch. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. All right, before everyone heads out, let me just make a couple of quick announcements. Yeah. All right. We want to say thank you to the City of Douglasville for the use of the Convention Center. If Tiffany Henderson could raise her hand, please, and stand up. Tiffany's having a ribbon cutting right outside the doors here after lunch, so please stay around and have a chance to have your picture made with Consider It Done personal chef service. We've got a great luncheon next month. Kathy Cox with the Georgia State School System. The superintendent will be here speaking to us. Please RSVP early for that. And we look forward to having everybody here next month and for the banquet. Thank you very much.